Night Radio's Callaloo presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard on Night Radio on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, nightradio.info. You can also check us out on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Jodel. Today is Saturday. It is the 11th day of January 2025. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. It was just the beginning of the new year, 2025, when Vincentians were informed of the passing of Ormiston Boye, otherwise known as Ken Boye. And it has long been the norm that when someone considered important in any society passes, the politicians hasten to deliver their respective epithets. When, among other things, that important person is a politician, then the politicians appear to run riot, lauding the now deceased. This has already been the case with the announcement of the passing of Boye. Boye died on New Year's Day. Boye was an interesting phenomenon. Unlike any individual who rises to prominence in the society, there are those who like you, and there are those who don't like you. And that is part and parcel of public life. Not too long ago, we commented here on Just Another Look on the passing of journalist Shelley Clark. And it was interesting that some politicians also raised the matter of Shelley Clark's contribution to journalism in Vincentian society. But sometimes you wonder why it is some politicians are anxious to speak about some individuals. As if there was nothing else that they could say. Of course, there's also a tradition that if you can't say anything good about the dead, don't say anything at all. There is much that people know about the life and times of Ken Boye and of his engagement in business and in politics. That may well be worth remembering. At the end of the day, some will suggest that truth matters. And so sometimes you ignore what the politicians have to say. Because politicians do not always speak the truth. Politicians do not always seek the truth. And so sometimes it may be better for them not to have spoken at all. And so, in listening to the politicians and their comments on Boye, there was a glossing over of some of the challenging aspects of Boye's brief political adventure. For that it was an adventure. Prime Minister Gonzalez's remarks on the passing of Boye was quite interesting. He went down the route of family. They were related. But he said little that knowledgeable and reasonable analysts of his own politics and his political interaction with Boye that Vincentians should know and should recall. Because whatever about Boye's involvement with sport and the sport of cricket and the challenges experienced there by the cricketers at the time, including himself, his engagement in business, his good fortune at being placed as the head of the Eastern Caribbean group of companies, the challenges he confronted there, including a case with the government, which he won. And then his seeming meteoric rise in Vincentian politics. But it was interesting. He ran in Central Kingston. And he won. The party was then led by Vincent Beach. A party that had its own political shenanigans. Because a group of business people thought that they should somehow become embroiled in the politics of the country in a more deliberate way. And were instrumental in bringing together the St. Vincent Labour Party and the Movement for National Unity. One with more than 40% of the electorate. The other with less than 5% of the electorate support in previous elections. And found that that was supposed to become a match. A match. And so a new entity was formed. And that Labour MNU unity approach contested the 89 elections. And Boye was part of that. But it was interesting because of the opportunism that characterized that entity. The opportunism that involved all of those involved. The business sector and the political parties. But interestingly, the Labour Party had just had its own elections. And Stanley John Storkey defeated Vincent Beach for the leadership of the Labour Party. But in their opportunistic wisdom, the key movers and shakers within the entity being created found it necessary to articulate and agree upon a decision that even though Storkey had just defeated Vincent in the St. Vincent Labour Party elections, and the St. Vincent Labour Party is the larger component of the two factions coming together, that Vincent Beach should be the leader of the new party, of the new entity. And we say opportunistic because that is what it was. Because under normal circumstances, that ought not to have happened. There is no way that a newly elected leader of what was once the country's ruling party allow himself to be part of a program that places the person he defeated over him in the new entity. Absolutely no sense, unless there was a lot of political mischief. Opportunistic mischief. And so the issue was that Beach became leader of the joint organization, Labour and MNU. And Storkey relegated. And of course, the leader of the new entity is the former leader of Labour. And the second in command is the leader of a less than 5% party. And so if you analyze that piece of the nation's political history, you will see that it is fraught with opportunism, political opportunism. And that while many wanted to get rid of the New Democratic Party, James Mitchell and his party, they nonetheless appear to have surrendered themselves to somehow facilitating a Vincent Beach with Gonzalez as second in command, knowing very well that if you were looking at all aspects of the two individuals and the position pointing to leadership of the country and prime ministership, that Storkey would easily have been seen as the future. Especially since comments made by the leadership of the Movement for National Unity in respect of Vincent Beach would have pointed in a direction where it should ordinarily have been an uncomfortable situation to have them coming together. But politics, it is said, makes strange bedfellows. And opportunistic politics has no qualms about which bed it sleeps in and with whom. And that is exactly what happened then. So Starkey got railroaded. And Beach, who just lost within the larger party. Now try and understand the rationale. Realistically, as opposed to the rationale that the nations, the electorate, were told. Utter political opportunism. Because some people had a very narrow vision, and others had a longer term vision, where it was felt that manifest destiny was at work. Not political mischief, but manifest destiny as far as they were concerned. And you have seen that play out since 1989. 1998, sorry. So there it was, in that political mischief. Boye stands as an entrepreneur. Boye's social standing allowed for his perceived charisma to locate him very nicely within that joint entity. And since, in that regard, he was seen as likable, there were those who felt that at some point he may be a light that could come through and eventually become leader of the party. At that time, of course, they clearly didn't have an understanding of the political opportunism that was at work. Boye himself was a political neophyte. But by the time they recognized that it was appropriate to make a move on Vincent Beach, politically, there were those within the party transitioning who felt that perhaps Boye could be the one to promote. And so another piece of political mischief took place. In the lead up to the elections of 2001, well, let's go back to 1998. The outcome of the election in 98. Beach called a press conference. And with him in that press conference was Ken Boye. Gonzalez was not at the top table for that press conference. And what came out of that press conference was a strong commitment from Vincent Beach that since the party since the party had the benefit of significant movement such that it earned the majority of the vote, it was felt then so Boye's meteoric rise in politics led to a situation where some within the party were of the view that Boye may well be in possession of the charisma and whatever else to become a future leader of the party, and probably, if the party wins, Prime Minister of the country. So Boye's engagement in politics allowed for him to be seen as a potential leader of the party. That, of course, had its own set of challenges. Because the political mischief that led to the creation of the alliance between Labour and MNU and the outcome of the 2001 of the 1998 elections, where the Unity Labour Party ended up with the popular vote but lost the system, lost the government by one seat. Beach's statement of wanting to make the country ungovernable was found to be most interesting. But as we said, Gonzalez was not seated at the head table when that was made. He bided his time and looked to see whether that would gain traction with the Vincentian electorate. He was not then considered any father of roadblock revolution. The roadblock didn't happen yet. The roadblock would come 2 years later. But Veitch was insistent, we will make the country ungovernable. And Gonzalez bided his time. But it is interesting because as the party reorganized itself, thinking that if you put enough pressure on the ruling New Democratic Party, that it may eventually capitulate to calling early elections thereafter, giving the ULP an opportunity to galvanize that majority, that popular vote, into victory at the polls more generally. And suddenly, as things snowballed, the politics within the Unity Labour Party saw a gradual shift towards supporting Boye. And suddenly, there appeared in the public domain a document purporting to be a legalistic analysis of the chances of Boye surviving and winning the case that the government had brought against him and Smokey, two of the leading individuals in the company ECGC. This legal piece suddenly appeared in the public domain, handed all over the place, suggesting that the government's case against Boye, forget about Smokey, but against Boye, was strong. And that there may well have been little chance of Boye being successful. But analysis of that document suggested it was nothing more than political mischief, designed to weaken those who felt at one point that Boye may have had what was required at the particular historical period to lead the Unity Labour Party. And there were those who went public suggesting that they knew the author of this potential legal document. There were those who were busy analyzing the style of the writing in an effort to suggest who the author may have been. Whatever about the author, the intent was clear. It was designed to give party members the impression that Boye's chances of winning the case involving him, the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines, regarding ECGC and his performance there was so slim that it would not have been in the party's best interest to gravitate towards Boye to support his leadership of that organization, the Unity Labour Party. That is what that piece of political mischief was about. So when people appear anxious to tell you about how much the relationship was this and was that, and to tell you how much family meant, whether it be political family or biological family, the facts are there to show the extent to which political mischief, political opportunism dictated what emerged in that particular historical period within the Unity Labour Party and within Vincentian politics. It was a question of survival. And some saw it as an opportunity to combine the political rhetoric to influence people's thinking with regard to who should lead the Unity Labour Party. If you get rid of those who some people seem to favor, if you weaken their chances, then there is a greater opportunity for others to rise to leadership. That is part of the story that needs to be told as we look forward to the burial of Boye. the way in which political machinations, political intrigue were brought together to influence the decision making within the party. There's no love there. If there's any love there, that's Labour love. Because they will tell you that is what politics is about. And so there was an attempt at eroding the impact, the potential impact that Boye could have had in any leadership tussle. Complete erosion. But it didn't work in the manner in which it was intended. Remember that Boye and Gonzalez seem to have patched up things. Because Boye may well have had no doubt as to where the political mischief may have been coming from. And so, for the elections of 1998, they were good. But between 98 and 2001, a lot of things happened. A lot of things happened. Gonzalez was elected leader. Beach moved aside, making way for Gonzalez to become the leader of the Unity Labour Party. Boye, Storky John, and one other politician appeared to become rather outspoken as to the direction in which the party was heading. And so the intention was to bring the party to its senses, quote unquote, and allow for a discussion and a decision on how the party would continue to move. In the end, one of the three broke ranks. And then there were two, Storky and Boye. Eventually, they had to leave the ULP. And a bit of political naivety allowed for Boye and Storky to form a new political party, the People's Progressive Movement, PPM, which never really got off the ground, and which hastily put a team together with little time left before the elections of 2001. Therefore, could not make any impact on the elections. But it is interesting because the very night of the elections victory of ULP under Raul Gonzalez leadership, 2001, heard Gonzalez announce that Boye called him rather early in the afternoon, in the evening, to concede the elections. One is not quite sure why he needed to call, because his party got less than even the MNU would have gotten when it existed. But Gonzalez appeared to have found that an important announcement to make. That cousin Ken called to concede. He was never in the race, really. But he never mentioned that Eustace, the leader of the government up until that time, had also called to concede earlier that night. It was not necessary, it would seem, for him to have done that. But he called about a less than 1% party, saying that he would concede. He had conceded. Anyone following the politics of that day would have immediately understood where the country was going. That a newly elected leader of the country would find it necessary in the first interview or the first message to the nation after gaining victory in 2001. And in that first message, it was necessary to say that a newly established party, which got less than 1% of the vote, that the leader of that entity called to concede, but happened not to mention that the leader of the opposition, the new opposition, the former government, had called to concede, to congratulate, and to offer a willingness to work with the new government. That was not considered important enough to state. The host of Just Another Look, because it existed, we existed since 1998, called the newly elected leader and asked whether or not Eustace had called to concede. And the response was, why are you bothering about that? There were so many things happening at the time. So many things happening at the time that you could have remembered that a less than 1% of the electorate party, that leader called you. But it was not important to mention that the leader of the New Democratic Party, which had formed the government for the previous 17 and a half years, had called you. If you didn't understand then which direction the country was going to go, and the nonsensical statement about moving together now, you didn't understand that contradiction, then you didn't have an understanding of Vincentian politics or the politics of Ralph Gonzalez. That you have seen come to pass. So at the end of the day, dear friends, Boye, the potential charismatic leader that some were leaning towards, and Storky John, the leader of what was the St. Vincent Labour Party, found themselves ousted essentially from national politics. From national politics. You see, it is times like these that people are called to reflect not just on the life and times of an individual like Ken Boye and the challenges he had in his life, much of which he may have made himself, but to talk about the reality of what has been happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with regard to the role played by some of these same individuals. So that at some point people can get a realistic understanding of the life and times of such individuals. What was good and what didn't work out to be so good. Because there were people who loved Ken Boye and who would have followed him anywhere. And there were others who clearly were envious of what he was able to do, was able to get to. And there were yet others who were anxious to see him fall financially in the country. To watch the collapse, the fall of the Boye mystique, the Boye empire. Yes, there were people who wanted and rejoiced at seeing that. Because that is what we have become as a people. And we must not retreat into a kind of namby-pamby kind of namby-pamby sorrow, a namby-pamby pretense, singing the praises of an individual who you may have wanted to destroy at some point, wanted to see fail at some point. Some so anxious to watch a fellow Vincentian collapse. The decision and the act of having an official burial for a former Minister of Government is as it should be. But it is difficult as a nation to sit and listen to some of what is being said in the political arena, which appear clearly contradictory to the political practice during what we call the Boreal Adventure. Just another look extends sincere condolences to the family of Ken Boye, that broader extended family, and to the most immediate family. But we must find it inappropriate for hypocritical comments to be made at a time when the politics is again heating up because elections are in the air. But as we try at the time of his death to offer pretense and appreciation, one wonders if at one point the decision to establish the Androbe supermarket may not have been an opportunistic venture, given that on the political platforms there were appeals for individuals and or organizations desirous of establishing supermarkets in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to come forward, essentially because the Unity Labour Party felt that the Graves, the Bonadis, and the Veras needed to be challenged. 3 Vincentian companies, one political platform after another, an appeal for people to get into the supermarket industry, for people with an interest, because these people needed to be challenged. When you did your own analysis, you recognize that these 3 groupings of families have been supportive of the New Democratic Party and not the Unity Labour Party. Understand the psychological and political intent behind those appeals. If they're not with us, let us put in place mechanisms to challenge them. That is the thinking. If that was the thinking, and that the then opposition was willing to put that on the platform, what does it tell you about that party's and the party's leadership commitment to Vincentian entrepreneurial development? Now you're hearing all sorts of things about entrepreneurs for St. Vincent. But remember the history, because this suggests that it may well have been an approach that these 3 families that got into and exercised control in large measure of the supermarket sector, they were all Vincentian. But if they did not support the party took the liberty of going on national political platforms, encouraging people to rise up and create supermarkets to challenge those. That is the nature of the politics that we want you to understand in today's program. If you're not with us, then find others to challenge them. Was the intention to get rid of them? Or is the intention that only entrepreneurs that are supportive of your entity, your political party, should survive and thrive in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? This is the party that says we love all Vincentians. This is the party that when it chooses says we are one nation and we must do things together. But this is not together. If we are calling forth organizations and individuals to challenge those who are and thriving, but who are Vincentians, then what are we saying in reality? These are that we should never forget. Because it's the same grouping that is leading the country today. And this thinking is consistent with years later at a convention, one of the leaders of the party getting up and saying, we must own the jobs too. In other words, even the jobs, not just institutions, even the jobs, our people must be the first to get them. Our people. How can you ever stand and talk about a society being together now? The problem for seeking leadership of this country and seeking governance of this country to repair the damage done by this line of thinking, this type of politics. It's not just partisan, you know. It's not just partisan politics. It is an approach to governance that is founded on a twisted understanding of what democracy means, if it relates to democracy at all. It's a twisted understanding. It comes from a twisted line of thinking. And it's the reason why we consistently appeal to our people to take time to examine critically, apply your critical thinking skills to understand what you have been told. The hope is that we only remember things for a few days. We're not supposed to be able to go back to that document that had no name, no author assigned to it, but which many people believe they know where it came from. That document purporting to be a legal analysis of Boye's chances of winning the case with the government and ECGC. Boye won the case. But the author of the document never produced another document and circulate as widely as that one was circulated. Retreating from the position adopted then. What kind of relationship then would have existed between Boye and the people who he thought may have been responsible for that document? That is the problem. Understand what it tells us about the politicians involved in the case that we are talking about. On the one hand, we are given the impression that the government is doing all that it can for all of us. And those very politicians who keep telling us that nonsense are the ones who get up in their own convention and talk about we must own the jobs too. So the reality is that what they do is not for all of us. That is what is happening with us. We are saddened by the passing of Boye. He rose to a position of prominence in the business sector, had his share of financial troubles, had his share of family troubles, and then experienced an incredible financial fall that saw him retreat. saw him retreat. There weren't many people writing documents about him anymore because he was no longer a threat. And there may well have been those who were happy to see him fall. Not many came forward and say, let's help. He retreated to his latest family. Some may suggest he became only a shadow of himself. And that happens to so many of us in our respective societies. And then, at the time of death, some of those who held these various views are among the first to come forward to make statements. We are a society that has lost the capacity to have shame. And so sometimes it's better to shut off, to block off noise, because that's what it is, noise. Some people speak because they have a mouth. But the reality is not something that they want to have a public discourse about. Sad, but true. Sincere condolences to the family. You know, we've just concluded another year keeping ourselves highly ranked in respect of murders and homicides in a single year. But don't worry, because Papa will find ways of talking with the bigwigs in security and make us all secure. But at the same time, we have to recognize that Papa doesn't appear comfortable. That his ambition of one time becoming the region's most popular prime minister has failed. And that one of his colleagues, Mia Mottley, is easily the most popular prime minister and in the shortest space of time. And so she, since taking office, and her initial international initiative by going to India and Africa with regard to assistance with supplies of COVID vaccines, anti-COVID vaccines, has continued in terms of her global reach. And the international community has been inviting her all over the place to speak, unlike Papa. So here we are today with Papa writing the United Nations, an advocate for global peace. After all these years, now is when he's writing for global peace. After all these years, not satisfied with what he says at the United Nations, he decides to write the United Nations and then tell the nation here You see what I'm doing? I am writing the international community. That's how big I am. That is to impress the Vincentian electorate more than anything else. Because if you can't keep peace at home, you can't keep peace at home. You can't make the situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines palatable for the Vincentian people. You have to be telling us over and over again what you're doing for Vincentian people, because ain't many people seeing what you're doing for us. Ain't many people. That is your problem, that at this stage in your political career, you ought not to be having to tell people, look how much I am doing for you. And I do this, and I do that. You see that building? I put down a new hospital. You see, I put down a new port. You see, I built a new police station. You see, I do that. You see, I do that. But your education, your so-called education revolution, has also produced people who are now among the criminal sector. 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds. You're in office for more than 23 years. You'll soon be in office for 24 years. These are people, your generation, your leadership generation. Yeah? Through your education revolution. They've been socialized under your education revolution. They are engaged in criminal activities. Rather than tell us what you're doing for us, tell us what really, apart from buildings, are you doing to shape the new Vincentian for the future. Not telling us that. Not telling us that. But you're also not telling us how it is birth certificates were found swimming out to sea. The birth certificates in a folder swimming out to sea. And the custodians for our birth certificates, the people who produce them and archive them, prepare them for distribution, etc., says that nothing is missing. And you know, it is fortuitous that we got a picture of the birth certificates in the water. That we got a report via Eyewitness News that the police department, like Eyewitness News itself, had received calls about birth certificates swimming out to sea. But they say that the water was so strong that they weren't able to retrieve them. Not even one. Not even one. So all we have is the photo and the reports from Eyewitness News that they were called about this situation. And they indicated too that the police told them that they were also called. But we couldn't retrieve any because they were swimming too fast. Birth certificates that is produced in one place. And the people who produce birth certificates say they ain't know about anything missing. But thankfully, people, Vincentians, saw with their own eyes a package containing birth certificates. And we have a photo of a package with birth certificates in the water, swimming on South River Road. The river in South River Road, out to sea. We have none. So nobody's explaining that. That is a security matter. That is a security matter. But all we have been told, forget about that. Remember elections coming, forget about that. We're going to give you all so many things in the estimates and the budget. You don't have to worry about some certificates going down the road or how many such other packages exist. That is what we are being told, By not responding and not addressing the matter, that's what essentially. Don't bother your head. There may be other such packages, but the other thing will get to swim up on their own and go down the river. So we are called upon to ignore this situation. We have it under control. We're worried about birth certificates as seen with people's own eyes. But the people who produce birth certificates said nothing missing. So are we producing birth certificates someplace else? Are we producing birth certificates that can swim so fast that nobody can recover them from the water? That's where we are in 2025. Yeah? That's where we are. So focus now on what we choose to call the election budget. Because that's where it is. And people getting up and thumping their chest that we do this and we do that and look at what we're doing. Politicians will always be politicians. They like the opportunity to thump their chest in parliament because clearly they know that it's being carried somewhere live. So a lot of the loud talking and chest thumping and picong, etc., may well have to do with their own perception of what constitutes politics. Look good, sound great, but listen carefully again. In the presentation of the estimates, the number of seeming stuttering points or challenging points where the reading of the estimates appeared a little weak. We know that the minister could read and that he's normally much more fluent. But go back and listen to the presentation and the estimates and the number of errors that were made in the presentation, not in terms of statistics, etc., but in terms of the delivery, in terms of communication of a document. And you'll understand. And so the talk shop that is our parliament, the gallery, is more playing to the gallery than addressing the Vincentian populace. We have to understand that Parliament is the legislative arm of government. And there's a reason why it exists, with members who won at the polls are being appointed by the respective political parties. They're supposed to represent the people. But nobody takes the estimates and the budget to the people before it goes to Parliament. And nobody takes it to the people after it is approved in Parliament. It may well be that our parliamentarians believe that the budget is not important to the average Vincentian citizen. They are simply to accept what the politicians, the parliamentarians, have decided. Because they vote, they approve. You get the estimates a couple. None of them on either side discuss it with the people and their constituents. They have that power over the electorate that they represent. So they can't find time. They make no time to bring the financing of governance in any given year to the people of the country. But they're coming by you on a regular basis to ask you to vote for them to be able to go back in Parliament to continue that nonsense. You're important only for your vote for them to earn a seat in Parliament. But you're not important to be engaged in discussions on the national estimates and on the budget in any given year that dictates how money is spent in governing this country. Because there's a feeling that you have no role in governance as the people of the country. They tell you how important you are, but they leave you forever in a position where the only way you can survive really is through patronage, political patronage. They like it when you come to them. And they can talk about the other day, this person came and told me. And the other day, this other person came and told me. But you're not going to them to discuss any matters really. Unless you deem it important that they should know. And our education system leaves us with a society that continues to be based on patronage. It continues to be based on non-meaningful participation. You are the recipient of the ideas of the politicians. You are the recipients of the decisions made by politicians about and for you, but you are not involved in the decision-making process. And so it is a fallacy when others seem to suggest that somehow we live in a democratic society. Somehow we want people to be important. But important only to the extent that they can convince you that what they are doing ostensibly for you is in your best interest. Your opinion doesn't really matter. Just your vote. Just your vote. So there's no interest really in the presentation of the estimates and the so-called debates that they have on that. And the same for the budget. It is for them, the parliamentarians, to sit and discuss and to make decisions on. What you coming to me for after the fact if I was not important to the decision-making process in the beginning? What you coming to me for? If you decide to give an additional $5 to a worker, that's your decision because you want the public support for the election vote. We've not changed our approach to politics since universal adult suffrage. It has been the same. The same rum and bully beef politics as the Jamaicans say. And we continue along that line while boasting of a so-called education revolution. A system that appears to be producing as many criminals as there are emerging in the society. Where is the evidence of change? A figment of the government's imagination, you may say. What exactly have we done to facilitate involvement of the people of this country in the decision making? The politicians tell you what they have done for you. Telling the people of the Grenadines, see what we are doing for you. And what is not being said is we hope you understand that this should translate into votes for us. That is not being said, but implied. And the nonsense of build back, rebuilding, we build back better. We build back better. So they have convinced themselves that whatever they're doing with the money that they're receiving for reconstruction, they alone make the decisions as to how that is allocated. We can't account for the continued high level of murder in the country. We cannot account as to how birth certificates develop the capacity to swim out from wherever they were originally produced, wherever they were intended to go, and swim out to sea. And we couldn't capture even one of those that was floating out. Maybe we were happy to see them go. We can't really tell the nation about that plane that came into Canouan and left Canouan. We have absolutely no information. We have a Minister of National Security who can say to a nation, yeah, some people in some other countries say that sometimes they just turn off the transponder. You have no evidence of that happening in the case of that plane. But even so, a plane lands in our country and there's no due diligence in terms of who's on board, not a single name. They refuel and then they leave. What happened? We don't have an air traffic control system. It has to get information. What sort of intelligence do we have in our national security ministry? Are we not giving others reason to be laughing at us? Because we're trying to give our own people the impression that we're serious about governance. But when you look critically at what you're being told and how you're being led, if you have any measure of reasoning capacity and intellect, you will be laughing at us. Because it is incredible that these things can happen. And you are being told by the leadership, focus. We're building more schools. We're building houses. We're building port. We're building hospitals. Why are you bothering yourself with such trivia as not having enough medicine? Is that an issue? We build the hospital. We put the facilities there. You want us to provide everything for you. You want medicine too? Isn't that somehow what we are being told? Are we understanding really what type of governance system that we have? Are we understanding that? So, at the end of the day, we're starting 2025 as we have always done, mamagaing the electorate into believing that somehow we've crafted estimates and budget in your best interest. It doesn't matter that you were not involved in the decision-making process, because we who lead know what is best for you. You don't know what is best for yourself. Isn't that what the colonials used to say? Isn't that what the colonial people used to tell us? Don't worry, we are looking after your best interest. And so we hopscotch from one project to another. And then we pat ourselves on the back for the success of the project as we see it. We've never involved the people in determining whether or not it was what they needed. We run a country on the basis of the perception of those who lead that this is only in your best interest. And we're not asking you. That is why you must never forget that the 2018 Poverty Assessment Report has still not been made available to the Vincentian public. Those who rule the country say they weren't satisfied with how it was done. So they're not discussing the results because they're not accepting the results because they didn't like how the questions were asked and what the questions were asking. They didn't like it. So you must not like it. They didn't like it. So you must not get it. So when they do it over according to how they want it, then it is to be assumed that if they like how that one is done, then they will bring it to you. But you see the one that was already done, there's no intention of bringing it to you. That is how much they love you. That is how much they value the very education revolution through which they have put you. That is how much they appreciate you as a people. You're not really stakeholders, you know. You're recipients of political largesse. You're not stakeholders. Stakeholders are supposed to be informed and engaged. That is not happening in governance in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We do things and we tell you how well they were done. Everything we do is a success. Anything we miss, well, there's no need to explain it anyhow because you're not involved. Welcome to St. Vincent and the Grenadines political system. A system of governance that leaves the people outside of the process. You're not really stakeholders. That is what has been happening for decades. And that is what somehow the politicians themselves and continue to convince the electorate is what is best for them. Sad, isn't it? Pathetic. But don't worry, we're building more things. In the meantime, remember that towards the end of 2024, Assistant Commissioner of Police tells us that we may have between 4,000 and 6 gangs operating in the country. 4 to 6 gangs. Others in the same system are not anxious to say that. One assistant commissioner of police said it's very clear. If you look at the pattern of behavior in the country, we have between 4 and 6 gangs. So if within our security services they can't come to an agreement of what they should be telling the public in terms of the reality on the ground, then how in God's name are we ever going to be able to come to terms with resolving the problem of crime? But don't worry, we're writing international community about the importance of world peace. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. You'll be listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard on Nice Radio on Saturdays at 6 p.m., repeated on Sundays at 9. Catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. Check us out on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course,